Enteroviruses are a very big factor in this. Not the only organisms, but they can easily account for places. Lake Tahoe was another place where they had some in the States, which is supposed to have a super sewage system, but obviously wasn't working on those days.
The question I'm about to ask Professor Hooper is about something he mentioned quite early on in the talk to do with people on benefits being threatened with having their benefit cut if they don't subject themselves to the treatments which are being offered by the newly formed ME centres, which are being set up around the country. On the internet at the moment are two job descriptions which have been issued by two National Health Trusts. These job descriptions relate to a philosophy already in place. This is the thing to bear in mind, right? At the moment they're supposed to be doing trials on treatment for ME/CFS, but this is already in place, of subjecting CFS sufferers to psychotherapy designed to prove to them that they are simply perpetuating their own illness through aberrant belief systems and will clearly adversely prejudice staff towards patients while singularly failing to differentiate between ME/CFS and chronic fatigue. This is a list taken from the job description, right? A list of descriptions. This is a definition of somebody with chronic fatigue syndrome. Yeah. Perpetuating illness behaviour, predisposing personality style, experiencing barriers to understanding, emotive and demanding, prone to verbal aggression, for whom medical intervention is no longer appropriate. Complex psychological problems, highly distressed, hostile to the rationale for adopting CBT, that's cognitive behavioural therapy, interpersonal difficulties, comorbid physical and mental health problems, sexual difficulties, history of trauma or abuse, and a subject for risk assessment, because the final one there, which I didn't get to, was the post holder is required to, quote, this is if you end up being treated by these people, the post holder is required to undertake risk assessment with distressed clients and to provide advice to team members and other health professionals on psychological aspects of risk assessment and risk management. In other words, emotionally and psychologically disturbed and potentially dangerous. That's us. Now, the question, sorry, it went on a bit longer than I meant, but the question I want to ask you, Professor Hooper, was how can we resist this? Because when you mentioned that earlier, I thought, the only way to get around this is an absolute boycott of these ME centres. That means everybody in the country has to do it. Because if they're going to stop our benefit for not turning up, the only way we can fight back is to have, it's a strike, right? An ME sufferers strike. We must boycott them. Could we get away with that? So.
I can quote my good friend in Northern Ireland, who they said they were clinic exactly the same way, psychiatrists in charge of people who were not bothering going. They just didn't bother to turn up and go. And now, of course, you're in difficulties because it also says in this thing, which I received as an email as well, which says psychiatric referral should be considered for those who fail to respond to rehabilitation.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is the agenda is that you're not going to be pushed around in this way. This is not an acceptable way of treating people who are ill, and it's not an acceptable way of trying to sweep under the carpet the real issues that affect people with ME. But you're going to have to, it's going to take a bit of nerve, and it's going to take a bit of organisation.
In Norfolk, we have a specialist, what's called a chronic fatigue clinic in Galston near Great Yarmouth, run by a very nice doctor. He's a genuinely caring man. But I must admit, I'm a bit concerned, with the general national drift towards psychologising of ME. And I've got in front of me his sheet that was given to me when I saw him as a patient, and I just want if you could comment on this, because under definitions he's got Myalgic Encephalomyelitis, brackets ME, and this is what he says about it. An undefinable term, but deeply embedded in the folklore of CFS. Many sufferers prefer this term. Now, to me, this seems completely at variance with the World Health Organization.
Well, I went past it very quickly, but there was a definition from the Australian people using myopathy, which said there's no definition for the illness. Well, there is. I think he's just got caught in the trap that's been set, and the people who stop it are you. There's a Sunderland South Tyneside ME group, which is a good group. It's run by a very dynamic lady who's when she's well, and they're trying to do the same thing in Newcastle, and they want people to be on that working group to set up this centre. And our lot are digging the heels in and saying we're not going down the psychiatric route. We want organic causes to be looked at. And Pauline, bless her, is digging her heels in and saying no to this. So I think you can say no to it. I mean, there are ways of saying no to people and digging your heels in without creating a lot of unpleasantness. But the point on your side is, first of all, it has a classification as an illness. It's neurological and not psychological. It's not a mental and behavioural disorder. It's a neurological disorder. And it needs to be investigated in that way. And the tools that have been provided recently are the Canadian definition, which came out in 2003, I think 2002, 2003. So that's the tools you've got. But unless you do, the money is being given to these clinics who go down that route. And that's compromised, I think, the integrity of some groups supposed to be working for ME patients, quite honestly.